you might be in the world. Here we are then. It's another Tuesday. It's 2100 GMT, so it must be us. Well, first question of this evening is to Bruce, and that question is, Bruce, how many more videos are left in your series of 1 million videos about DJI goggles?
Only 243 now, so there's plenty of meat in that sandwich left, so keep watching.
I was quite impressed that you had the if people haven't seen it, using analog signal in via was it HDMI in? I can't, or video in?
No, just composite AV. Yeah, just
composite AV, because I have actually seen quite a few people ask about that, and there's quite a bit of confusion, I think, in the marketplace about well, have I got to have a DJI controller and digga. People are a little bit confused as to what it is, I think.
Yeah, they are, and I think at best value form, it's just the goggles and the ear unit if you've already got a radio control system, because as others have found out, if you put your radio link and your video link on the same frequency, then you have some really weird issues, such as if you're flying close to another craft with a powerful 5.8 gigahertz transmitter. So you've got two models out there flying along. One's got the DJI digital, one's got conventional with 5.8 gigahertz analog video. You can actually fail-safe the other craft by flying too close to it. Even though your own radio control transmitter is miles away, you can actually swamp the receiver, the DJI receiver, with an analog FPV signal. I'm doing a video on this now. So it's kind of, you can shoot people out of the sky just by flying close to them. It's great.
Gosh, bring back the old days. But you're still, it seems like you're enjoying it. It seems like you're enjoying the quality of the video.
Yeah, it's interesting because I flew a week basically digital, only digital, and getting quite used to it. And I was actually quite apprehensive about going back to an analog system. But hey, it wasn't the big disappointment that I had expected, because there are pros to both sides of things. Whenever I'm flying the digital, I'm always a little bit aware that at any time I could get a frozen frame, and if you're flying close proximity, that's always an issue if you get several frozen frames. Whereas with the analog, you can tell more progressively that it's snowing, even though the DJI tends to start getting quite pixelated along the borders. It can throw your curveball and lock you out for a number of frames. Whereas analog is more predictable. You can predict it better, so you feel more confident flying at the limits of range with your analog system than your digital system. And so, although you get the much better picture with the digital, and if you're flying close enough, you don't get any frozen frames. If you're just having a lot of fun, you don't have to worry about those things. And analog is actually a little bit more relaxing to fly.
Okay. And what about sticking a flight controller, one of those teeny tiny ones, just to keep it level on those silly windy days that you're flying?
Well, that wouldn't help. My reactions are so fast that the flight controllers be a waste of time.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
I have to admit that little sub 250 gram plane is held up remarkably well, because I was flying just before a big storm, and it was rough as hell. And hey, just kept flying, no problem. So I'm not going back to big FPV models. Pity Nicola isn't here, because big FPV models are just, it's more money to lose. It is more visible by people who might be concerned about what you're doing, and it's more risk. So why do we even need to go to these great big 2-meter wingspan FPV models, when once you've got the goggles on, you don't know how big the model is?
Yeah. Yeah, well, no, go like that. No, I won't go down that line. And Ian from the jungle tonight, I see.
Yes, in the groovy jungle, as it probably sounds. Yeah, I've been watching Bruce's. I haven't had as a chance to put out as much on this as I'd liked. I had a holiday come in the middle of it and a couple of days away, and I was doing a lot more with the basics in the back end. I didn't want to put too much out before I was 100% comfortable with everything myself, and I've also been interested to sit back and watch what Bruce and the others have said about this, and I've sort of done that in a way to sort of sit back and see how well it stands up to the heavy scrutiny, because obviously with these things there's always a balance of what are the guys who are testing it saying, what are the real world guys saying. And because this is potentially, it's not a controversial product, but it is a product that certainly flips, it's a step change in the industry, probably, in the sense of it's the first proper digital system. There's been ones before, but I think it's safe to say it's the first one everyone goes, we can use this. We can use this on a daily basis. It's not perfect. As Bruce said, digital behaves differently, and that will always be the case. But it's the first one guys can say latency to a point now isn't the deciding factor of moving forward. Now the deciding factor is A, can I fit it in my frame? B, do I want to invest in the system? Do I want to invest in the RC and everything else? And I'm, every day I'm quite blown away with the positive feedback, because when I first got it, I had my hands on it, I felt it was something interesting and different. But it's quite nice to see everyone else saying it as well now.
I wonder if it's going to change the way people fly stuff and do stuff, and I wonder if it's going to change it. So good evening to Nicola. Welcome to the new system. Look, we're all here. Look, we can go like that to you and things like that.
I think what's interesting is Bifrost took a big step back. Oh, sorry, Nick. You.
No, that's fine. Just commenting on the new system seems to be working for now. Gary seems to be here.
It's better than last time. Yeah, it's interesting because obviously Fat Shark have announced this week that they've gone back to the drawing board with Bifrost. I was quite skeptical on their original post, if I'm honest. I felt that post that they pushed out on day one was find something in a box quickly and stick it on a frame to make it look like we've got something. I might be being a little unfair to them by saying that, and if I am, I apologize, but anywhere near what they sort of implied. And they've clearly met their match with this. That's for sure, because they've looked at it and gone, you know what, we're going back to the drawing board.
Yeah, and Louis, good day to you in the chat there. He's asking the question we all want to know, Nicola. We all want to know. Come on, it's been a couple of weeks in summer there. Where's the plane?
Still up in the mountains, but a search and rescue operation is being prepared. However, its smaller brother, the Mini Crosswind, was maiden today.
Oh, okay. And did you dare to take it that far? And what did you maiden it with? And how was it?
Well, half of the gear I'm using for that plane is sort of in beta testing right now. So a few things prevented me from actually going out and about, which I would have done actually, because the plane is absolutely stunning. And I don't mean the way it looks. I mean, I even tried to help it with aileron and rudder to make it go into a tipstoe, and guess what happened? Nothing.
Well, that's cool. But how heavy is it?
About 2.8 kilograms.
And what's the maximum wall? That sounds quite heavy. It's a smaller one. What's the maximum wall up it can?
Actually, it's 1.6 meters, and I was quite surprised. Yeah, that's exactly right. But you're too far away, Louis. Too far away. I was quite surprised how easy that thing took off at that weight, and that's without the gimbal. Adding the gimbal, that's around 3 kilograms, and that's the gear I have in the Believer. Battery, motors, ESCs, same thing. Only the autopilot is different, but it's pretty much the same weight. So basically the weight difference is mostly from the size of the airframe, and perhaps the servos a little bit, because I'm using the 14-gram Coronas rather than the 20-something or 30 grams, whatever it is on the Believer. They're larger there. But it is amazing, and it's so easy. I mean, it took off so easy at that weight. It's like weighs nothing. It just took off like, and I used auto takeoff first time out, like maiden flight, maiden takeoff. I just tried the new takeoff routine that they've introduced with the new autopilot, and it's bloody brilliant.
And then you can easy to hold in the hand and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I don't know. You mentioned one of the previous casts that some people were complaining about it being one of the two, either the binary or the Mini Crosswind was either too bulky, or I don't know. I'm not sure they were talking about this plane, because this, at least for me, was easy to hold and really no problem at all. And the plane is amazing. I mean, all control surfaces were mechanically trimmed 0 during setup, and I didn't have to dial a single click of trim.
And you put the CG on the manufacturer's recommended point then, did you?
Well, for the first flight, I wasn't exactly sure what that is. So, you know,
Well, yeah, but that's you
ballparked
say.
it, but turns out I was pretty close. Moved the battery just a little bit to the back on the next flight, and but both times just perfect takeoff, perfect flight behavior. Absolutely. I mean, this plane will be going places. I can tell you that much. Yeah, this
So
plane
the
will be going
flight controller then wasn't masking any CG issues.
No. Everything worked perfectly in manual mode because
Okay.
after takeoff, I switched to manual mode and flew around because I wanted to trim it. Turns out it didn't need any trimming and it was flying absolutely perfectly. Then I went back to stabilize and actually before that tried to stall it, then tried to stall it in stabilize. Nothing works.
Now, M. Wilson, I'm trying to work out whether that must be degrees C, not Fahrenheit. Too hot to fly today. 39 feels like 47. That 39 is hot.
Yeah,
and it is a warm old day. That
Snowflakes all of you. You're all snowflakes.
well, yeah, we know that. We know we're not as manly as you. Now, James, has your roommate stopped using the microwave yet?
He has. It's literally about 10 seconds ago. So that was very good guess there, Gary.
No, I was looking for clues in the lighting in the background. You could just see the door open, just a little flare of lighting.
Haven't you noticed James's tan?
If the microwave was giving off light, I'd be a little bit worried. We might have a bit of an electrical problem with it if so.
Gary's getting ready to play Sherlock Holmes in the next series.
Okay, I'm a qualified microwave engineer, actually, and looking at the color of your face on one side, I consider getting a new one.
Yeah. What was I going to say? Yeah, well, the light might go out. I mean, before we started, it was going out all the time when I was talking to Bruce, but it hasn't for a minute. Now, James, there's an event coming up. You can tell us about an IRPAS event, and I can't for life remember what we were going to talk about the last time you tried to come on, and we had the very failed hangout a couple of weeks ago. But anyway, the event.
I don't remember what happened yesterday, to be fair with you, but so we've been organising this for far too long. It's probably how long I'll tell you, but we've managed to pull together some serious stakeholders. So the aim of the event is to try and progress the conversation on around these air proxies, because we kind of got two contrasting sides of a story. I kind of get both of them. I think there's a middle ground to be had, and we're trying to find that middle ground and try and progress that conversation forward. So we've got attending. It's going to be on the 19th of September. We're going to be putting out a message to members tomorrow, and basically inviting them. We've only got a small room, unfortunately. It can only hold 40 people, which is a shame, but funds are limited to some degree. We were offered a larger one, but it was going to cost thousands and thousands of pounds, and we were just, we're unfortunately, it's members' money we'd be spending, not our own. So we don't, with this one, we managed to go and get a freebie, which is great. So it's going to hold 40 people. We've got so confirmed, like 100% confirmed. We've got CAA. So we've got a member from the CAA turning up. We've got Steve Forward from the Airprox board. We've got Simon Dale from Airprox Reality Check, and we've got Christian Strew or Adam Lisberg from DJI. We've also invited and just waiting confirmation from Nat and from Balpa. So it's shaping up to be quite an interesting event, and really where we're going to be pretty strict with this, because what this isn't an event to do is for people to start scoring points and start trying to come up with false accusations or whatever. The point of this is to try and find a bit of truth, find some common ground, and work out where we go next. So we're trying to be as pragmatic as possible, and we hope that the guests that turn up do so, and we can really sort of get down to the nitty-gritty of where the facts lie and how we can potentially improve the process and what the next steps are. You know, once we've kind of found a common ground as to what we think could be improved or where the truth lies, then what are the next steps for the industry? And there may be some discussions there around electronic conspicuity, because I think RPAS are very much aware that this is a really important piece of technology to move the industry forwards, not just from a capabilities perspective, but also from a safety perspective, and also not just from a drone perspective, but also from a manned aircraft perspective. You know, we're getting, at the moment, a drone hasn't killed a person. Manned aircraft have. You know, you only have to check the newspapers and Google to find out how many air proxies there have been, or not air proxies, but mid-air collisions between manned aircraft. My old gliding instructor, as an example, died about 3-4 years ago, a guy called Chris Armstrong. He was involved in a mid-air collision. He was in his glider with the GA aircraft. So I know people personally who have died from mid-air collisions. So electronic conspicuity isn't just about drones. It's about the whole of aviation, and we need to recognise that. And one angle which is interesting is actually looking at, you know, I don't think drones necessarily, or that there will be groups of the drone community who probably will push back on the electronic conspicuity piece. But I think probably one of the biggest groups who are going to push back on it are likely to be GA, or certain areas within GA. So there's a lot of aircraft which don't even have electronic, you know, batteries on board. So those kinds of flyers, you know, the more mature flyers, I would say, are probably going to be the ones who are going to really push back. Maybe also paragliders, and people like this.
I think sorry, as Nicola brings a fuselage in, stage left. But I think you might, you know, you're a little bit right, a little bit wrong. And it's interesting you mentioned gliders, because they kind of are leading the way with electronic conspicuity now, with various devices and also paragliders. And in fact, it's having an inverse sort of a problem. They're able to see where their chums are thermaling, and they're all diving for the same big thermals. So it's causing its own sort of issues. But it doesn't have to be, oh, must I do it again? It doesn't have to be expensive anymore. You know, it really doesn't. And it's a piece that is trivial to solve now. Do drones even need to be conspicuous? Can we not just report our position via a fins-based electronic system? They are digital devices, as you say. Do we really need to be transmitting and clogging up the sky with yet another little signal?
It's interesting because Richard from Altitude Angels says no, because the drone users need to know where the planes are, but the converse or the inverse doesn't have to happen, because it's our responsibility to stay out of their way. So why do we need conspicuity?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The law falls on us. Why should we? Okay, it's not why should. Why should is the wrong term. However, as you say, the way the law is set up is that we always take sidestep to everything else. Therefore, our job is to get out of its way. So all we need to really know is where it is. And as I keep saying it, I always come back to the fact of my concern with all of this is the pilot's own safety and the pilot's own location data, how that's handled, because at the end of the day, not everyone needs to know where that aircraft is and why it's there. It's as simple as that.
I think we're the wrong sort of group in some ways, aren't we? Because I think we all agree now, kind of, in one way or another, it's got to happen. We all want a modern sky, and yeah, there will be a proportion of established users that are not so willing to come to the party. But I think that's largely because they're being forced down the road of ADS-B, and that can be very expensive.
I think you need to get some airline pilots on the panel next week, Gary. Bring some airline pilot union representatives, you know, ALPA, get them on here, and then we can have a more heated discussion.
No, they'll all be drinking at this time of night just before they go flying, and that's what they'll be doing. You know, come on.
You won't mention pilots, and like two of Ian and Nicola have just
disappeared. Yeah.
It's
ALPA people have just come up and hauled them away. But I was going to actually say, are you going to be providing buns for this, James? Because it does sound like it's going to be a bit of a bum fight if it kicks off. And if you see our man Andy from the CAA, Nats, actually in one of the slides at a talk sharing the air, which happened recently, basically about UTM, very pointedly had 50%. I should have had that ready to share. Let's see if we can do that. Very pointedly had 50% of the air proxies were drones. Dun, dun, dun. But that's only based on how the reports, and I'm sorry to be ranting at you because it's not your fault, James, but it's only how the reports have ended up at the AirProx board and how they've allowed that to happen that allows him to create that slide saying, look, it's 50% of the problem.
It is. I can kind of I do sort of see the argument from both sides. I'm going to hop back on that fence again for this one because I think that there is a risk there from that drones pose. Quite what that risk is, we don't we can't really quantify. And from an aviation, a professional aviation perspective, aviation has always taken the risk-averse approach to everything. So if there is a potential risk, they will, until they have information and evidence that would suggest that it's not, they will categorize it as a risk. So they will always err on the side of caution with these things. I think the problem is more about how that information is then disseminated to the wider public, because that's one of the things that the newspapers don't want to go and report the actual facts. They, if they can report something in a light that will, cast drones as these scary things, then they will do. And I think that the way the information is reported is certainly open to that kind of manipulation. So I see it from both sides. There are some improvements that need to be made, but I think we do need to, as a community, take on board that there is a level of responsibility that needs to be solved here. But I think that in a way, I think that the debate is almost like a red herring. Whether or not there are drones out there and which are coming into conflict with manned aircraft, really what the conversation should be about is electronic conspicuity. And this is why I think we need to get past this and kind of be like, well, okay, if we haven't got good enough data, like, how do we get good data? Well, let's put things that collect data on our machines, and then we will have good data, and then we know what the truth is. But that's going to have a whole range of different benefits to it if it's done right. So I think we want to be one step ahead of this conversation and be talking about what essentially what this question is leading to, rather than discussing the question over and over and over again.
I think that slide from Andy is brilliant. We should be using that because he says 50% of the airprocs involve drones, right? But if you look at figures from around the world, in most countries, there are at least 10 times as many drones as manned aircraft. So per capita, the drone operators are much better behaved, causing far fewer issues than the manned aviators. Per capita, it's the manned aviators that are the bad actors in this situation. We don't need regulation. We're operating at 1/10 the level of risk that the manned aviators are. So it's time that the regulators start taking a look at manned aviation and why their offending is 10 times higher than that of drone operators.
Well, what I think is a really interesting kind of factoid is getting down to electronic conspicuity. If you look at drones, DJI represent about 80% of the market, is it roughly? So call it 70%, but they are all conspicuous already. So you can get out an aeroscope and you can detect where DJI drones are. So if we say that 70% of the drone market is already conspicuous, and then we also say, well, okay, if 70% of the market by 2020, all drones sold are going to have ADS-B in, they're also going to be able to detect aircraft which are conspicuous. So we're going to be in a situation in sort of a year or two's time where drones are going to be both conspicuous and able to detect other aircraft. So, but if you're looking at other aircraft, if you're looking at other sort of aircraft categories, I don't think you could say the same thing. I think gliders, yes. Commercial aircraft can't detect drones. Drones can can detect commercial aircraft. GA, some do have transponders, but they can't detect drones. So I think it's interesting to sort of look at, I think this is a wider problem within the industry, not just something that drones need to put up with. This is a much, much wider debate.
Well, haven't we moved forward with the ADS-B system, which is a very old system, and really what we should be moving forward with now is some form of rebroadcast network, which is available. There's a great one in the UK called Pilot Aware that allows to your device. I think it's Pilot Aware. It's got the Rosetta thing, but it's rebroadcast of all modes of data of aircraft that are out there through another great website over in the UK, 360radar.co.uk. Chat there pulls all sorts of data in, the glider data, the pure ADS-B data, and the multilaterated mode S data, and pulls it all together and chucks it out again. And well, Louis saying, what's the wrong math? The renewal to Jones isn't 100% yearly, but I'll put that comment up on the screen. What am I trying to say? So shouldn't we really, the conversation is about, ADS-B is nice, but let's build that modern network. And that's what they need to be thinking about, and not rolling it out in 30 years like they've done with ADS-B, but rolling it out within 10 years or 5 years and making it low cost. I'll stop ranting. I don't know. What do we think?
My problem with ADS-B is it changes nothing, because the reality is, how often are aircraft getting in the way of other aircraft? Okay, the APROX reports say every 2 minutes, but we know that's nonsense. So the whole problem with ADS-B is we're putting something into a product that's going to change nothing. It's as simple as that. People know they're not allowed to fly new airports. All the DJI gear already has NFCs in anyway, so the guys can't really get to that point anyway. But we're moving forward with the technology, which is, it's okay. The information is nice, but the reality is it doesn't make things any safer. Nothing changes. No one's flying at 3,000 feet. As this conversation broke out on Twitter this week, so ADS-B is all very nice, but it's a problem that doesn't need solving, in my opinion. That's the problem.
What I think the biggest problem, if you're going to boil this down to one sort of sentence, really, what the problem is, we're currently in a state where AirProx reporting is done qualitatively, and we need to change it to quantitative sort of detection. We need to be able to not just say, oh, I think I saw a drone there, and it might have been 1.5 kilometers away. We need to say, okay, that drone, there was a drone there, it was 1 kilometer away. The safe distance between those two aircraft is 500 meters, so it wasn't an AirProx. That's what we need to be able to get to a point of, but the only way to do that is to have technology to enable that. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck in this qualitative, he said that, she said this type scenario.
But the data, the facts don't come into it now, even when there is facts. So I also don't necessarily see it changing. I understand your point, James, to be able to say, here's a flight log, we were 5 kilometers away. But that doesn't change the headline that's already in the paper. That's my point is, once it's already out there, it doesn't matter how much data we throw at it. The classic example of that was the BBC program. We tore that apart left, right, and center, and no one wanted to know, because facts don't fit the narrative. Therefore, what was the point? So again, it's all very well us having a flight log that says, yeah, it was 2 kilometers away, but they've already gone on the front of the paper to say the plane was sitting on the plane wing, and that's the problem. I just don't see what ADS-B brings. It helps the pilots see an aircraft, but we're not in the way of them anyway.
Well, it'll help get general aviation and people mucking about. It helped get them up above 500 feet and not winging around. When they first trialed it in 2000, I think it was, in Alaska, there was a marked improvement in safety because pilots thought they were being watched. So it'll have that benefit, if nothing else. But now we have, of course, the Aireon system. I'm not quite sure how you say it, which is satellite-based ADS-B, which is great. But the trouble is, for that to work, you've got to put all your gubbins on top of the aeroplane. So great when you're over the ocean and there was nothing there. But as soon as you come back into normal coverage land, the stations aren't seeing you now because your stuff's on top of the aeroplane. So it's a real kludge of a solution, I think. But millions and millions of dollars have been spent on setting up ground systems, and they're not going to change it quickly.
Speaking of low flying, here in New Zealand, I think in the last 12 months, there were more reports, or about the same number, possibly more reports of low flying aircraft submitted to the regulator as there was of drone incidents. So again, we need to bring the whole argument back to the manned aviation community and say, why do you expect us to cover your asses when you're endangering your own lives at such high rates?
It's funny with the ADS-B wing. There must be something in it at the end of the day that I'm missing, because obviously the ProFev added it, and it's become standard now from the end of the year. It's going to be in the Cube. DJI are doing it, so there's definitely a march that way that isn't going to be stopped. I just don't see what it changes overall. That's my problem with it. I think more data is fantastic. You can never have too much data as a pilot. However, fundamentally, I still don't see what benefit it will bring to the industry putting ADS-B in all of these aircraft. Out could be different, but in.
Well, yeah, it'll stop them banging into each other a bit more, and then it means air traffic can switch off big, expensive radars. That's one of the benefits of it.
But I don't see them all doing it. That's my problem. I see all the drones.
Well, just what James said, isn't it? We are in a position where basically this industry is compliant in many ways. Now hurry up, the rest of you smaller industry that's stopping us from cracking on. Yeah, that's the bottom line, isn't it?
And put it this way: this problem could be 70 or 80% solved within 3 months if commercial airliners put AirSense in all of their 737s. If they put what is it? It's not AirSense. It's
Aeroscope.
Aeroscope. Yeah. So there's a technological solution to this. So why not do that?
Yeah, Aeroscope isn't the perfect solution either because it's proprietary. But if you take, EU have said they want an open standard within 2 years, which still hasn't existed yet. We don't know anything about it. So potentially in 2 years, there'll be an open standard. And as James says then, every aircraft should be able to have that and log that. So when they turn around and say there was a drone off the wing, they can actually say, well, actually, no, it wasn't off the wing. It was 3 kilometers away because your own data is saying it was 3 kilometers away. My concern is if everything's on our side, the narrative won't change, because whenever we try to change information with facts, they don't listen. What we need them to do is stop posting nonsense in the first place. The only way they'll do that is if they have the information before they go to press. So they look at it and go, he was 10 kilometers away. It's a non-story.
Yeah, I think though the problem is if we had Aeroscope in all the aircraft, it's going to add further load to pilots who are already exceptionally busy with cups of coffee and chatting to the hostesses and dusting the computer. So it probably would not be a safety feature. You're drinking the bottle. It's not a safety feature. And we would see a surge in the number of reports, because previously drones that would have gone unnoticed will pop up on Aeroscope and like, oh, look, another drone. So it would be counterproductive to have that, because as we say, airline pilots don't need to know about drones. Drone operators need to know about airliners. And so that's the whole thing. Put the responsibility where it legally lies. Don't try and shift things around. Keep manned aviation above 500. Keep drone operators out of the way of aircraft, and then everyone has their own role and responsibility. And we don't have to have people doubling up. Let people carry the can for their own actions. And I think, as far as Aeroscope goes, the only time a drone is going to be an issue to an airliner is when it's approaching or departing from an airport, because otherwise they're way too high. So why don't they just integrate Aeroscope into the air traffic control system, so that instead of having every aircraft with an Aeroscope, air traffic control has an Aeroscope, and they can pass that information on as and when required, and they can filter it. So if there's someone hovering at 50 feet in a park, 4.1 kilometers from the airfield, the airline pilot doesn't need to know about that. It won't be an extra burden on them.
If only we knew someone that ran a UTM that took a feed in that then could be displayed to controllers. Where's Richard? Should we get Richard on? if only that. Yeah, the solutions exist, don't they? Are you going to, James? Are you going to be videoing this meeting? Because I'd certainly like to see it.
Yeah, that's certainly the plan. We need to go and get people's permission to do so, but I don't think people will have an issue with that. So yeah, I think we'd like to do that. So that is the plan. But we will see. We will see.
I think you're going to have the biggest time stopping it turning into a agenda fest, and I know that's not what you guys want, and I know that's not what anyone wants. But the second you're going to put Balpa and a few others in, it's going to be difficult. Good luck with the refereeing. It's going to be difficult.
I completely get where you're coming from, and I think this is why we've kind of got a set agenda as such. So in terms of the lineup, we've kind of done it in a certain order that will, we're going to start off with how pilots report this kind of stuff, how that information gets relayed to air traffic control. And so from the sort of air traffic control perspective, moving on to then how it gets reported and analysed within the AirProx board, then the alternative on AirProx reality check, moving on to DJI and some of the solutions that they're coming up with, and then a final sort of statement by CAA to sort of discuss what initiatives they've got going on and how they perceive the risk from AirProx reports and AirProxes in general. So we're going to finish with a questions panel at the end, and this is where things will probably get more heated, I would imagine, because during the presentations it's going to kind of be, it's probably going to be slightly less heated. But what we really want to do is we want to make sure that everyone is focused on actually trying to achieve something. There's no point in creating an argument because it's not going to achieve anything. And if people do start trying to create arguments, then I think we're going to try and direct the conversation away. So the host is going to have to be good. So we haven't yet confirmed who's hosting it, but will do. But yeah, he's going to have a little bit of a job on his hands, but and he's going to have a little bell in the corner which you can ding when it becomes the start of a new round. But yeah, I think if we start off on the right footing and we open up the meeting in within the right context, hopefully people will come on board and will try and do the right thing rather than trying to sort of create their own agendas and their own. And I think that will be clear for viewers. If a particular stakeholder does decide that they're going to sort of stray and go off on their own tangent and to try and make some claims which are blatantly not true, then that's there and open for people to see. So I think we have to try and ensure that people do stay constructive, and if they do, they're going to come out in a good light.
Well, fair play to you. Fair play to ARPAS, I should say, I suppose. Well, no, fair play. This seems like a grand idea, and if you don't try, you're never going to find out, are you? It'll be very interesting to see. I'll look forward to watching this, and at least NATS and the CAA know you, and the AirProx board know you have concerns. So it's pretty cool. I say, well done, ARPAS, and maybe the first of many similar meetings.
It's amazing. Since they got off that fence, there's no stopping them, isn't there? God, look at them. They're on fire.
I believe the fence fall over.
It got a little bit uncomfortable, to be honest. Like,
I like to have my dig on that, James.
It was one of them security fences with barbed wire on top. So
I do like to have my dig. Yeah.
I don't know if you saw recently there was the electronic conspicuity call. The results from that are now out. I don't know if you've seen that. Anyone?
I haven't seen that, no, and I must go off and look for that.
Do you want me to share my screen with you?
Yes, give it a go. See if you can do it as well in this crazy new world.
So these are some pretty graphs that they came out with, but
why didn't? Oh, yeah, there it is. Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
You're still there, James?
Yeah, I'm still there. So basically, this one was whether the CAA should act to coordinate the adoption of electronic conspicuity in targeted blocks of airspace. And pretty much everyone, apart from this one guy whose interest not identified, I'm not quite sure.
I need to change my name to that. I like that.
Was that you, Gary?
I could have. Oh, it could have been.
Could have been one of the members.
So it's good to see, even across, from general aviation through to aerodromes and air traffic control, everyone sort of seems to agree that we need this. When you start looking at expanding that out into GA, I think still you're looking at a majority, apart from model aircraft flyers. So I can understand model aircraft flyers, have been doing what they've been doing for a long time and probably don't want this kind of thing. But what we've seen in the past with BMFA is that you get segregated airspace around model clubs. So I think there are some easy solutions to that. Looking at that, I think that that's a perfectly workable solution within the model aircraft operators. Looking at this one is probably less interesting. Targeted blocks, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. But there are loads of data here anyway, so go and have a look. Where is it? I need to try and find out where we actually found where I found it from. But let's go back to this.
Right, everyone. Yeah.
But yes, it has been. It is out now. So what I'll do is I'll give you the link, Gary, and then you can share it with your audience in the comments of the YouTube video.
Interesting that they've separated UAS/drone operators and model aircraft operators there.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because clearly there's quite a big difference between drone operators and model aircraft operators in terms of what they think. Looking at that, model aircraft operators basically don't want any electronic conspicuity, whereas drone operators, the majority say we need some kind of combination between transmit, receive, and rebroadcast. So,
but look how sort of dodgy that graph is. In that the number of people there is 10 in the model aircraft column, and there's 34. There's many more than that in the UAV or UAS drone operators column. So, and what am I trying to say? Those coloured bars are not necessarily as sort of telling as they might be, are they?
Well, it's not representative, is it, of the whole community? That's the problem. But it certainly tallies with what you'd expect to come from the Model RC industry, doesn't it?
That's pretty bad, though. The total number of is there a total number of respondents there somewhere, James?
I'd have to have a look. What did they say at the top here? Maybe 327 responses in total.
Well, I was one of them.
Yeah, so I was 310. No,
that's amazing. And what's this one telling us?
So this is the what was the question here? The three free text questions elicited a considerable number of responses. So this was where you could sort of just openly say what you wanted and what your concerns were. And most of them were around cost and practicality, most of those responses. So I think the big one there is, how do you go and get electronic conspicuity devices into these machines in the first place? How do you power them? And how much is it going to cost people? Because if it's cheap and it's easy to do, people are going to do it. But if it's going to be expensive and very much laboursome, then it's going to become a lot more difficult. So
it should be a USB rechargeable dongle that you can just tape to the side of your aircraft. That's all it requires in this day and age. No bigger than one of those small touch key things. At the end of the day, the technology to do this isn't the problem. It's the willingness for everyone to get on board. That's the problem, isn't it?
Like one of these things, really, that would do it. A Trackemo.
Yeah, but if you're going to have it USB size, it's got to have a GPS receiver. It's got to have enough power to do the chirping, the transmitting. So the flight times are going to be limited. You'll need to have somewhere quickly recharging, or have multiple ones if you're doing like a day's work somewhere. So there are issues. It's not quite as simple as I think Ian might think.
it's as hard as we want to make it, really. That's the problem, isn't it?
Let's make it really hard and it won't be done. That's the best way.
It'll never happen.
24-volt lead acid battery, and yeah, we can make it hard.
Lead acid, yeah, the car battery. It's all the Nick's amazing point. It doesn't make sense for hobbyists at fixed sites. No, they should just be, just they're flying there at the model site like they have done for 100 years.
Why fixed sites? It doesn't make sense for hobbyists at all. We don't have airliners being menaced by foam model Spitfires. It's just, no, let's define the problem more accurately before we start throwing ill-conceived solutions at it. I think model aircraft are not the problem, so let's exempt them.
Wow.
Yeah, I think
we're the wrong group, aren't we? We're the wrong group for answers of that.
I think we end up getting down to that same conversation we've had on multiple occasions of what define what a model aircraft is.
Yeah.
So now we have to get ALPA in here because it gets pretty boring when we're talking to ourselves. ALPA, we need to get D-Drone, we need to get all these other people in CAA. Let's have some fun.
D-Drone said they were coming. The epic bloody vlogger upset them, and then that was that. They were coming. We were ready. We were set up to do the ambush. Then you went and blew it.
I just say we exempt, if at EC, we just exempt sub 250 because they're defined as harmless. So if they're defined as harmless, why do we need to track them? And then secondly, we can, clubs can go and get exemptions and have an area of airspace where they can operate their models and they don't need electronic conspicuity on them.
A lot of people don't have an area. A lot of people want to fly. They live in an urban environment. They want to fly in the park. They don't have to go 20 miles into the countryside to fly in an approved flying area. And let's face it, the definition of what's a model and what's a drone is real easy. Drones have GPS. The drones that cause trouble have GPS. Model aircraft, they don't have GPS, so why fit them with one just to meet the electronic conspicuity requirements?
Well, I think you might run up against manufacturers adding GPS to standard receivers just so that lost model tracking, let's say. So if you make the definition GPS, by accident, it might come into your receiver anyway. No flight controller function.
That's a fair definition because we do have some models that do have GPS. You got long-range FPV. Nicola is a good example. But these people are offenders. Look at Nicola. He's a major threat to the world's airspace. So we get him out of the sky.
He is.
We all agree on that one, yeah.
Some models will be defined as drones because they'll have an onboard flight controller with GPS to allow them to do return to home. And yeah, there's a high level of risk with that because if you're flying at BV loss and you're miles out and you lose your video and it doesn't automatically return to home, there's no way you can avoid a manned aircraft if one gets in the way. So yeah, they should be categorized as a drone and treated accordingly. But for the average kid flying a scale model of a Spitfire in the local park, he shouldn't have to be treated as a drone because he's no risk to person, property, or pets.
Yes, or pets.
Nicola, I was going to say, Nicola, at that moment when you lose your aircraft at 10 kilometers, how do you always ensure that you haven't caused a major incident?
Well, that has only ever happened once.
We're not going to forget it.
On top of the mountain.
He just finds a hill and just flies into it.
Couldn't resist.
On top of the mountain in conditions that really would ensure there is no living creature up there. So yeah.
Well, James mentioned 250, and it's quite interesting. I can quickly go to the Nicola. It's the dangers of the big hill. Exactly, he's trying to knock that hill over. The 250. I put up my this week's clickbait. Title frame for this is this Mavic Mini, but what I've seen in a lot of the clickbait sort of articles is people are actually talking about ADS-B and electronic conspicuity and how, as some reports are saying, later on all the bigger DJI drones are all going to have ADS-B in, and the smaller ones sub 250 won't need it. So it's funny that sort of the idea of electronic conspicuity in our world is coming into the mainstream sort of thinking, as it were. And I don't know, what would you call the DJI crowd normally?
I think people, the regulator. I mean, they want to have special privilege by having these safety features. That's why they've got the geofencing and things. It makes it easier for them to continue to sell products that are going to be used in a certain way. because they can say, "Oh, our drones won't fly near airports." So it is common sense. It's a good idea from a business perspective. You add the features and functionality that's going to make the regulators more inclined, because like as Canada, you have to be certified. If you want to do commercial operations, you have to have a certified craft. So the DJIs, they weren't certified initially, now they are. And if that's going to happen more and more around the world. Countries are going to say, well, look at the EU. I mean, with EASA stuff, you're going to have a drone that is basically certified, meets the criteria. So DJI are just adapting to the demands of the market, and that's why they're doing that. It's not necessarily because it's a good idea. It's because if they don't do it, they'll be out of business.
Yeah, well, I was thinking more not necessarily DJI, but all the various websites that are around and about are picking up and mentioning it. Which was something that nobody was doing a couple of years ago. Nobody even heard of ABS-B.
I think the EU regs have helped make a step change with everything. I think a lot of people took notice when the EU regs come out, and whilst ADS-B isn't specifically part of that, the overall idea of classifications of craft sub 250, the sub 250 market, everyone's saying that's going to be the way forward. I'm not so convinced, if I'm honest. I still think they're saying below sub 250 registration is still fairly a minor thing to do. It won't stop people, and that them will do it anyway, so it's not going to stop people buying aircraft, but it does seem to be everyone's concentrating on this specific niche area, sub 250. You don't have to worry about anything. They're almost selling it as you can do what you want.
Well, I blame Bruce for that. He's been making videos to that extent for ages.
In Canada, you can do what you want. There's no prescriptive rule.
Yeah,
pretty much. I think it's going to be interesting to see how that sub 250 category affects the commercial world, because when I sort of first started seeing the Mavics coming out, I was like, these aren't going to be good enough for commercial. But actually, if you just want to look at a roof, you just want to do a residential roof inspection, if you've got a sub 250 model, it's probably good enough for that. And that, it's not going to be able to do what a commercial operator does, but it will have a use. And so it'll be interesting to see how many applications open up with that sub 250 model categorization and being able to basically fly it wherever you want, whenever you want, pretty much.
Yeah, it's opening up already. I mean, I would fly a sub 250 in places I wouldn't fly a bigger, more dangerous craft. And certainly with this whole issue of flying over people, I'd much rather be flying a sub 250 than a 5 kilogram octocopter over a crowd of people, because if bad things happen, doesn't matter what safety things you have in place. Look at the Swiss post drone of the Switzerland drone. Yeah. I mean, it had a parachute and the damn thing failed. So things break, things don't work. So the lower the weight, the lower the risk.
Yeah, failure is a reality. It's as simple as that, isn't it?
We'll just I've often thought just take 6 of them or whatever they are. If they've got 10 minutes endurance with a fairly good camera, put 6 of them in a box. There's an hour's flight time out of that box around the building that you've got to inspect, and send one bit to one part, one bit to another, and I'm sure stuff like that will start appearing before very long.
And you can hire 6 drone pilots, more jobs, and it can be done in a sixth of the time.
Well, talking about hiring pilots, well done there, Bruce. Did we see in Australia that they're not very happy with Project Wing, because they have sent the money back to the motherland and kept hold. I'll put a link in the thing, and not employed many people. ABC News reporting jobs for drone pilots promised, but new robot delivery company is light on local vacancies. Let me put that in here. There we are. I'll put that in the comment. So are we surprised that autonomous vehicles use less people?
The drone industry that was going to produce all these jobs for drone pilots is doing exactly the opposite. It's the same with, like, we're talking about driverless cars and delivery vehicles. Apparently UPS have been using driverless trucks in the USA for quite some time, and no one knew about it. It's all been under the radar. But yeah, the drones of the future, the ones that are going to be the commercial operations, there's not going to be a guy there flying them from point A to point B. It's all going to be automated. There's a guy, it'll be like an airliner. There's a guy sitting there dusting the computer in case something goes wrong. So there won't be this massive jobs. And it's actually going to take jobs, because previously you might have had your little pizza boy on his motorbike scooting around town dropping pizzas off. Now the drone will do it. So the pizza boy's out of a job as well.
Yeah.
No, you're becoming that guy who was the guy in the horse shed who used to go and have to clear up horse manure, and now is having to fix cars in a
No,
garage.
he still is that bloke. He is still
Yeah.
I'll be honest, this whole thing stems of I've still never seen one decent job appear in the drone industry. And it's funny, it's a wider aspect. If anyone keeps an eye on the commercial operator groups, James will probably know where I'm going with this. There's jobs posted a couple of times in the last week or 2-3 weeks, and everything that's being posted is low paid compared to the skill set it involves. And the wages are frankly not shocking, but they are nowhere near where they need to be. And the levels of technical competence. Someone wanted someone to have software coding experience to write gimbal control and flight control algorithms, and they were paying less than 30 grand a year. It's just bonkers.
Doesn't this sound like the aviation industry? What do pilots get paid while they're trying to get their hours up? They get paid nothing. They almost have to pay for the privilege of flying people around. They leverage someone's interest to get maximum value. It's going to happen in the drone industry as well.
Yeah.
I've got a question. I'm going to put this into the comments as well. What would you have done, dear viewer and team? So on the weekend, pull up a sandbag. Here we go. On the weekend, went down to a little tourist place, and they had an outdoor poikikos competition, which is cooking over out pots. Anyway, so it's in this sort of shopping complex, if you will, outdoor place, farmery, countryside, touristy place. And lo and behold, a Mavic arrives on scene. And it descends. I kid you not. If I was 2 foot taller, I could have pulled it out the air. If I had a stick, I could have smacked it out the air. And then it departed, big punch out, and went. And I watched it go. And I walked around the outside of this complex, and I could not see the operator anywhere. So they'd come in from maybe 100 meters or from behind a tree or whatever, but they weren't anywhere obvious. And it was still flying. So wherever they were still going. And I must admit, I thought at the time, if it had come low enough for me to grab it, I would have grabbed it. What would you have done? What would anyone have done?
Delivery, that's what it's all about. Delivered
it to, of course, that's what they should have done. But it's just as an aside. But I thought it would. Well, would you grab it, or I can, because it was, and nobody in this competition knew it wasn't related to anybody as it was. And it came down, and it hit several 360s among the people about 2 or 3 feet above me head, not very high. So should we knock it?
Flying over people, was it?
Oh yeah, right over us. Like no, it was about 6 or 7 feet.
At it and got a free drone.
Well, see, I said to herself, I said, if that comes any lower, I'll grab that. And she says, you won't do that. So, so that's right.
Rule number one, you mentioned it first, Gary. You should have just thought to yourself and gone, I'm going to do this. And remember, if you grab it, you need to tip it on its side. Tip it 90 degrees because it cuts the motors when you tip it 90 degrees.
No, but when you because it's all open fires, I would have just brought it down gently and dropped it into one of the open fires. But it's just crazy. So if you want to fling that back round to model aircraft flyers, if you want to get them involved again, no one would ever be flying their Scale Spitfire around a cooking competition in a shopping thing. It just wouldn't happen. So, and I was thinking, does that mean that the drone operators are basically just selfish? I'm super ranting about this. Come on,
but the question mark is: was he doing anything dangerous? Just because he was there doesn't mean it was dangerous. Okay, he probably was at that height, but
that's why I was asking if he's flying over people's heads, because as we know, bad stuff happens. But it might just be looking for a sausage or something. That's what happened in Australia. The guy flew his drone down to Bunnings at the sausage sizzle, and the guy put a sausage on it and flew it back, and he got prosecuted.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Well, I don't know. I think I would have been a little bit happier if the guy was. Obviously it's not that big a risk, but if the guy was there, I could see him, and he'd at least make comms with everybody, and everyone knew what was happening. I would have been a little bit happier.
Here's an interesting point: if the aircraft was 10 foot or 100 foot, if he was 100 foot, you might not have even known he was there. But is it any more dangerous? It's complex, isn't it? You know, as you say, I think we all look at that and go, I'd have plucked it out the sky because you know it's the wrong thing to do. At the end of the day, none of us here would do that. But it is an interesting question. Is it actually dangerous? And okay, what's the difference between 10 foot or 100 foot? At 100 foot, we might not have even known it was there, yet the danger remains exactly the same. It's just you can't see it. Yet at 10 foot, everyone could see the aircraft. It's a stupid thing to do, but it's a complex thing. It's not as simple as saying it was dangerous or it wasn't, was it?
See, what I think the solution potentially to this is, you know, we talked about electronic conspicuity, but remote ID kind of fits in very closely with that. What they're sort of talking about is obviously the police will get access to those databases, but you know, would there be any benefit in the public having an anonymized version of a detection app which they could just put on their phone, for example, and they could, if a drone was near them and it was misbehaving and doing things it shouldn't be, they can get a code which they can then forward onto the police forces, for example. So if a drone's causing a nuisance, then there's actually a way to anonymously identify someone and forward that information onto the police to then look up on the database.
I mean, like a registration plate on a car. Hey, we should register all drones and put plates on them.
Well, I did think if only this place had aeroscope, they would have. They could have identified what it was.
I do agree with that point James made. As long as the app records the data and it's not just as simple as saying that was seen there. What you need is the evidence to show where it was, isn't it? And that's doable via an app anyway. That it would just log the GPS position of it. It was the, you know, my biggest concern with this is always people saying there was a drone flying over my head when you weren't there, and that's always my biggest concern with it.
I think the thing we've shown here that there are bad actors who will do bad things, but they are very, very much in the minority. I mean, look, out of this entire panel here, Nicola's the only one that falls into the bad.
But hang on a minute, that's 1 in 5 in the world. So that's actually quite a big number.
To be fair, Bruce, Nicola's the only one that's stupid enough to say it. The rest of us keep our cups shut. Sorry, Nicola.
No,
Really not sure what you're talking about.
No.
I wasn't listening.
It just struck me. It was just very. So I was keen to get everyone's opinion. I actually did take a little video clip of it. It was, you know, it was here. I wasn't filming it there. I was filming it here.
Send it to the Daily Mail, Gary. Send it to the Daily Mail.
I should have done. We could all be killed, you know. We'll all be
While we're
killed.
talking about Nicola, he posted some really good videos. That little camera, the Osmo Action camera, seems to be working pretty well. Some of those videos are pretty good, Nicola. I've got to say, I enjoyed those flights.
Especially in combination with the Theotech gimbal.
Look, I can make him go away if I do that. Look, there he goes. Yeah, sorry, Nicola. Sorry. Yes, it does. You're cloud flying. Have you had any more epic cloud flights with that combination?
Well, not yet, but I did fly with it on the Mini Crosswind today. And even though I didn't do anything impressive or amazing, I'm hoping to get to that because the plane will definitely be used a lot, especially the way it's flying. And I mounted one of those adapters that come with the camera on the nose of the plane. So basically I can put in the camera with its mount or put in on that same adapter one of those Theotech handheld gimbals. With a GoPro adapter, just a quick swap so I don't have to modify the whole nose section to fit a gimbal, at least not yet. It's not going to be damped, but you know, between the gimbal and the camera stabilization, I don't think that's going to be an issue most of the time.
I'm just putting your...
I was going to buy one of those Osmo Action cameras till I found out you had to activate it. You can't just throw a switch. You've actually got to go and give DJI your email address. And the one thing that is the worst part of that DJI digital FPV system is activation. My God, I spent 3 hours trying to activate the damn thing because you go to the DJI site and you sign up and I've entered my password twice and counted them or clicked on the squares that had chickens in them with the capture thing, and then it said, I went to log in, and then it said, incorrect password. And I thought, nice, I'll try it again, no. So then I got it to send me a password, and I changed the password all the time, every step of the way, count the chickens, click on the power lines, which squares have got tractors in them, the number of captures. I mean, are they expecting major bot attacks or something at DJI? Who's going to run a bot attack to register at DJI? Nobody. What are they doing? I just want to turn on a set of goggles. It shouldn't be a mission. I mean, when I buy a set of Fat Sharks, I plug in the wire and it goes. When you buy a DJI, you've got to spend hours and hours battling and showing how clever you are and that you're not a robot just to get the damn thing to turn on. Oh, that's the worst. That's the worst out of the box experience I've ever had with any product ever.
Well, do you want to know a little bit of insider information? You know those capture things. They're actually feeding AI algorithms. So basically, when you go and click on those boxes, that data is then being used to train algorithms to be able to detect objects within photos. So you're actually helping Google basically take over the human race.
Well, I would because I get them wrong most of the time.
You must know which boxes have chickens in already, otherwise it wouldn't work.
As I say, I can't because I get them wrong most of the time for at least 3 attempts.
I'm not going to be drawn into this old man conversation of how we can't do technology anymore.
I think the activation is something people bring up time and time again. My understanding is it's for their warranty, and okay, companies don't have to do it. There are many ways you can prove warranty without doing it. My understanding with the DJI stuff is they do it. It's all part of how they do their whole warranty thing. They could obviously not do it if they wanted to. There is a quicker way. I think you went the long way, Bruce, by the sounds of it. The quicker way is do it all from the app. The Action is a good camera, I'll be honest. It's a shame it didn't have HDMI. It's about the only thing I wish it had was a HDMI output. It would have been perfect. But there's rumors of the GoPro 8 around the corner, isn't there?
Yeah, more than rumors. There's the pictures and all that sort of thing. And on that quickly back to the Mini Mavic, is it a thing? Isn't it a thing? Do we care? Yeah, that's about where I'm at with it as well. Oh, look. Oh, that's a clue, isn't it? Hey.
Of course it's a thing. Everyone's going to be bringing out a sub 250. Parrot will be doing the same soon. Interested to see where the Skydio go down that route. But really, what have we got at the moment? We've got Parrot and we've got DJI. That's the consumer.
Go out of consumer drones? Weren't they giving up on the consumer drone business?
Yes, the Anafi is only in the business. Well, yeah, I think they are, aren't they, Bruce? I thought they said they were going, didn't they?
I think they made the announcement. Yeah.
They've discontinued everything apart from the Anafi, apparently. To be honest, the Anafi is a good system. You know, it's got an SDK. You can hook into it and you can develop your own sort of algorithms. I know DJI's got the same, but it's basically the only real competitor at the moment to DJI. So I think we do need to support them. And you know, I love DJI to pieces, but I think it's healthy for the market to have some competition, because otherwise, you know, the industry is going to stagnate very quickly. There will, you know, if it does stagnate, then other players will enter, I think. But you know, I think Parrot, you know, it's not quite at the same level as DJI, but it's not far off.
Parrot were able to do what Unique weren't, which was produce a product that most people wanted, and it's a shame because the H is actually a really good aircraft in many ways. In fact, the H has the best camera controls I've used on any camera drone. The way it does its camera controls is fantastic, but no one really wants it, which is a weird situation. And what Parrot were able to do is do something totally different to what everyone else did. They did it with the camera that pointed up. They put a 20 megapixel sensor in it, and they did some really cool stuff with the Anafi. Artel they seem to be but they just do their own thing, don't they? They'll put a product out which will get them sales. And they've done an advert this week. I don't know if you've seen their advert, which is Switch from DJI to them. They've got an advert running on Facebook. It's going to be interesting to see where everyone goes. I think the legislation is saying sub 250. You'd assume everyone would get in that space. That's what you'd assume, wouldn't you?
Well, it's only till they say naught, or
Yeah.
110 like in Australia, and was it 109, whatever it is, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I'm not sure we've got this window of opportunity for very, very long.
No.
Well, just think, Gary, in about 50 years' time, we'll have all of these autonomous flies flying around, which will be sub 3 grams, but we'll have like 8K cameras attached to them, and we'll be able to fly inside your house and do very naughty things.
I watch Black Mirror as well. Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, technology. Well, that's what's happening, isn't it? The technology is rushing to beat the restrictions, and great it is too. Parrot still has the wing. Didn't they discontinue those wings?
They discontinued the Discovery, haven't they? But the EB and all of that.
Oh yes, that's true. Yes,
the
EB and the EB.
Because that's their Pro line, in it. But basically, the Anafi's fallen under their Pro line for the most part now, and it all falls under that, doesn't it?
And Parrot can do, according to Lewis, sub 250 in 1.5 minutes by just using a smaller battery. Yeah,
and I think, is it the Mavic? No, one of them is very close as well. One of the DJI ones is pretty close. They could all shave the battery off, but it might be a way for Parrot, because they could probably do it without losing much face on that one. You know, they can afford to probably lose a little bit of battery runtime and get into that category.
Well, the Anafi is currently just 320 grams, so it only needs about 70 grams shaved off. Which, you know, if DJI can take a Mavic from 900 down to 250, I'm sure it wouldn't take much to go and get a 320 down to 250.
They got pretty good propellers on that Anafi, haven't they? They're pretty spectacular design, I understand, aerodynamically. So there's a lot of thought gone into it, and Parrot always was. I mean, they were ahead of the game. What was it? What was the first one? What was that thing called? I can't remember what it's called now.
Was I remember the first one they demonstrated. It was the first drone, really, wasn't it?
Well, it was the first sort of more AR drone, wasn't it? AR drone. And yeah, it was the first one with an app, app and camera and altitude sensors, quite a powerful Linux computer on board. I mean, it was quite far ahead of its time, really. So they've done some good stuff, and his daughter's a Bond girl, so you can't get better than that, really, can you? AR drone, yeah.
Parrot got the opportunity to do a lot of good stuff, especially considering they own Pix 4D and all of that side of it.
That's their money, isn't it?
The domestic market, domestic market's just a play in the park for them.
So DJI might have 70% of the equipment market, but I wonder, of commercial users, I wonder just how many use Pix 4D. James will probably have a good opinion on that.
Probably I'd probably say about 50% of the market on it would be my guess, but that is literally plucking a number out of thin air. There is, I think it's seen as the easy option within the photogrammetry market. Pix 4D is kind of, it almost tells you what buttons to press as you walk through it. So there's not a huge amount of thinking involved. So it's a really good system. It's an end-to-end solution. Rather than a very, if you're a more technical person, then, Pix 4D is still a good solution. It still gives you that control on a lower level that you might want, but there are probably other products out there that are a bit more tailored towards the more technical people. Certainly if you're getting into the market, Pix 4D is a fantastic solution and gives you what you want.
What does that go for now for a year subscription?
Too much.
Compared to paying, I don't know. I don't even know what a Phantom 4 is, but that's like getting on. It'd be sort of a Phantom 4 a year, wouldn't it? So it's kind of a better model, isn't it, for the business to be selling that software time and time again?
Well, this is why Silicon Valley makes software and not drones. There's a lot more money in software than there is in hardware. So. You sell hardware once and they only replace it when it breaks or goes wrong. So the better you make a product, the less money you make. Whereas with software, you just stick them on a yearly subscription and the money keeps rolling in. So it's, software is the holy grail for everyone. And I think this is why the Western world has kind of moved away from manufacturing things because there's not so much money in it. We always say, oh well, the Chinese are leaps ahead of us in terms of manufacturing, but actually, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like, in some ways, it's probably a good thing because we're concentrating, on the software side of things, which is where the bigger money is, in my opinion.
Well, it's what an interesting world we live in, isn't it? But yeah, we look at DJI and think they're the biggest players in the market, but I wonder in certain parts of it, and I wonder why DJI haven't come up with their own Pix4D solution, or have they, that I've missed?
Well, they have touched on it with the P4 RTK. That has its own built-in for 3D modeling. I think it is, off the top of my head. It's not full on. It's very low end compared to, say, Pix4D, but they have touched on that side of it. So who knows? You never know how far they'll go with that.
And Louis says they have as well. Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Look, we've gone past the hour. We've gone call it DJI Terra. Yes, of course it is, Louis. You're absolutely right. Of course it is. What do I want to say? I want to say, has anyone else seen anything else? Because look, it's 15:15. Oh, tapping of Nicola. Go ahead, over.
I don't know if you covered this. I think I joined in right from the start, so you may not have talked about it. May have talked about it last week, where I actually was asleep and didn't watch the live cast after that. But following that downed plane by a flock of birds in Russia, I vote for registration for birds, flight plans, flight permits, examinations, etc. Like every 3 months, by the way.
Well, they've got security sorted. You just have to brush it off as they fly overhead. But,
I mean, it's only logical that yet another plane goes down because of birds.
But what can you do about birds, mate? You can't. I saw on the Daily Mail today there was a seagull killed a pigeon.
Well,
vicious things, these birds, and it was seagulls that brought that Russian plane down. But I mean, the thing is, the people always say, "Oh, but we're doing everything we can," but some problems can't be solved. I mean, the seagulls, they're not going to follow the rules.
I don't know if you've seen that. Apparently, a prairie village in the US has basically come out with a new proposed ordinance. So when you sort of start complaining about regulations in the UK or Australia or wherever you are in the States, basically you're not going to be able to fly over property that the operator does not own or have consent to occupy. And you're not allowed to fly near people without their consent or in a way that could hurt someone. Basically, what they're trying to do is stop people from window peeping. This is the whole point of this. Is they don't want people flying up to people's windows and watching people as they get out the shower or whatever else they might be up to.
Yet they don't require you to register your Nikon 1000 and things like that. It's the media's driven this. But did you also see? I saw they destroyed those cooling towers in the UK and the power grid went down. And the first headline I saw was, "Drone hits power lines after cooling tower destroyed." I'm thinking, what? And you go and it says, "Oh, someone said it could have been a drone." I mean, the headline said drone, and it didn't turn out to be a drone.
For some reason, one person said they saw a drone, and suddenly it was nothing to do with the cables banging together at all. No, nothing like that, was it? No. I did see that when you were on about, James. I didn't read it fully. I started to get through it and thought, this is far too much nonsense for me today, and closed it.
Well, that's the trouble.
Spirit of thought for us in New Zealand, those are the rules we have to fly under now. You cannot fly over property without prior permission of the property owner.
But that's crazy though, because that's like they don't restrict that for general aircraft. So are drones different to aircraft or?
Yeah, drones don't kill people when they fall out of the sky into suburban areas, like full-size aircraft do.
But the thing is, drones will have to pay for the modern sky. I think that's only right and fair that all the costs are put on the bigger users. You,
Gary.
Sorry?
No, just you.
oh, all right. Yeah. But that's all these UTMs, all these systems are going to be paid for, and that's unfortunately it seems to be we're lining up to do the paying.
Well, the UK are off to a great start with the registration database. I mean, that's fantastic.
Yeah, we're not far off that now. The time is coming ahead rapidly. We're end of August, so there'll be a lot more coming in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah,
Louis talking about Pix4D again, so I feel like I should probably give a nugget of golden information here just to like keep your viewers happy. But if anyone's looking for photogrammetry software, have a look at Reality Capture. It is.
That was FX Node mentioned that. I just put that one up there. Yes, I'll have to look at that as well.
So on the website, it claims 10 times faster than any other software on the market. And the quality of the point cloud and data that comes out of it is absolutely outstanding. It is incredible. I've used it. I wouldn't probably say it's 10 times faster, but it is definitely a lot faster. You know, when you see the scroll bar moving, it's not like you're looking at it thinking, has it crashed or frozen? You can actually see it moving, which is always nice. You know, it's always nice to see a scroll bar moving. But Reality Capture, it's got a slightly strange model in terms of its pricing strategy, because it's like, I think it's like 80 quid for 3 months for up to 2,000 photos. When you go and get beyond 2,000 photos, it then suddenly becomes £8,000 a year. So from a few £100s a year to £8,000 a year, depending on whether you're above or below 2,000 photos. So it's a bit of a strange pricing model, but it's a very, very capable piece of software, and I've used it in the past, and it's produced extremely high quality and accurate data, if you know where I'm coming from on that one. I do have another piece of breaking news, actually. I don't know if you've seen, but there is actually a complete solution which will basically solve the whole drone problem. Serena Williams has basically realized that now tennis balls are the perfect anti-drone device, and you can now smash them out of the sky with a tennis ball, apparently. So we don't need, drone defense systems are gone. You just need a tennis ball and a tennis racket. And
Ian's being kicked out. Cheers, Ian. Ian was kicked out of the whatever room he was occupying in the hotel.
Well, it was a tennis ball and not a t-shirt or jumping up to get that drone. But James, with that license situation, do they not realise that when people get to 1,999 photos, they'll just start a new account?
Well, that's how you buy Pix4D, isn't it?
We certainly can do that, and but I think it's actually not. It's not actually a stupid pricing model, because it's quite clever in a way, because what it allows you to do is, as you're going through that sort of early stage of your business, it's very, very cheap to use. And it's only when you sort of start ramping things up to the larger projects and the more sort of commercial volume where it becomes, okay, well, you get to a point where you're like, okay, it's worth us now spending that kind of money to go to that next stage. So it's not the only benefit. You get other benefits as well. I think you get things like parallel processing and as well, and I think as well you get command line interface, so you can sort of actually control the software from scripts and stuff like that. So it sort of allows you to do a little bit more on a commercial level. Whereas if you're just a one-man band and you're sort of wanting to produce high quality data, it's actually a very, very cheap, cost-effective alternative, and it's more capable than anything out there. The quality of the outputs is incredible. It's not very good at orthophotos. So if you're wanting to produce orthophotos, it's not your cup of tea. But if you're wanting to produce 3D models, it is currently the best thing out there on the market, and the price point that it's at for up to 2,000 photos is brilliant. So yeah, there's a golden nugget for you. If you want to donate to me, then it's www.donatetojames.com, and I'll be happy to accept your donations.
FX Node says you can use it with LiDAR as well. I wonder how the pricing goes with that. 2,000 points will be gone very quickly.
Yeah, so you can use it with LiDAR, you can use it with laser scanner data. So from a surveyor's perspective, if you've got laser scanner data, you can bring that into the software, and you can actually register your photos off that laser scanner data. So if you've got already got a 3D, some sort of 3D geometry to your laser scan data, and it's already controlled, so it's already positioned in 3D space, then you don't actually need any control on your photos, because the photos can orientate themselves off that laser scanner data. So you can sort of merge the two data sets together, which is exactly what surveyors need. That's absolutely key for them. So, you know, from a surveyor's perspective, it's a fantastic piece of software, and I couldn't recommend it highly enough. So, you know, Pix4D definitely has its place, and if you're wanting an all-in-one solution that will do everything you need, then it's great, but it's going to cost you a bit more, and it's going to be a little bit slower than things like Reality Capture. If you're a surveyor, then reality capture is probably the one you want.
So let's just unpack that for dummies for me, really. So I've got some aerial imagery, I've got some 3D data from a LiDAR, and I've pulled them together, and what my photos are doing is coloring the scene in a little bit more. Would that be the right way of thinking?
No, not necessarily. If you imagine you've got a bunch of photos, and you're wanting to create a 3D model, well, that's useful, but where is that 3D model in the world? Yeah. You've got no geolocation data, and even if you're using a Phantom 4 and your photos are geotagged, the accuracy of that geotag is within a few meters. So your 3D model might be within 5 or 10 meters of its real location, but that's not very useful from a surveyor's point of view. They need to get it down to that kind of distance for it to be useful. So what you can do is, if you've already got a control network on site, so you've already got some points on site where you know their position, what a laser scanner will do is it will scan from those control points. So you've got a 3D model of your environment, which is geolocated within, you know, millimeters, if not centimeters, of its real location on the planet. And then once you then bring your photos in, those photos will then be able to generate a 3D model of that same area. So imagine you've got you're wanting to do a model of a castle. Well, you might laser scan the outsides, for example, or a big building, a big mansion. You laser scan the outsides, but then you generate photos over the building so you can capture the rooftops, and then you can merge the two data sets together without having to do any extra control.
Yeah.
Does that
I instantly thought, yeah, I get that. I instantly thought, when you said castle, I instantly thought, oh, like Bruce's house. Then that's what I thought when you said that. Yeah. So some mileage in having a ground-based scanner of some sort in order to capture some data to help you tie in all that stuff.
Yeah, well, what a lot of drone pilots will do. So if you're a drone pilot, what you want to be doing is partnering up with a surveyor. You want to be working with surveyors, because if you're doing drone surveys, you know, the word is survey. These people have been doing surveys for decades. They know what they're doing when it comes to producing, you know, survey accurate data that's useful for a bunch of different services. So, you know, team up with a surveyor. They'll be able to provide the laser scanning, the GPS, and all of that component, and then you can take their data, bring it into your reality capture your photography, and then suddenly their house, where they're missing the roof because they can't capture the roof anymore, you can fill in that gap and give them back some data which is complete. Because with a lot of these models, when say for instance you've got an architect who wants to you know, do an extension on a building, that architect, what they'll want to know is what they want a full 3D model of the building, but it's not any good if they haven't got the detail on the rooftop, and the drone can provide that detail on the rooftop very, very well. So if you've got the surveyor will already scanned the insides of the building and the outside of the building, but they'll be missing the rooftop. So you bring in the drone, you bring that 3D model from the laser scanner into your reality capture, and then you tie your photos into that to then fill in the roof area. And that's certainly the way that some people are doing it.
But that's where you're really cheap, or not cheap, but small, lightweight. That's what I should have said. That's where your lightweight drone, your Anafi or your sub 250, or when it gets sub 250, that's where it could just lift up and just do those little bits that needed to do that colouring in, and you don't need that big system flying over the centre of town.
Maybe, but you probably need a better sensor than that, I would imagine.
Sure, yeah. But it'll come. That will happen.
Yeah, you know, the Mavic 2 is quite a good sensor, actually. The Mavic Pro 2, So, certainly that could do a roof survey, to sort of BIM accuracies. If you do it right, like I'm not saying, it's easy to do. There is a certain skill that's required to be able to capture the data and how to fly it and what kind of angles you need to capture the data from, and the kind of overlap. When you're doing a nice grid pattern in a 2D flat surface of an area of land, a mapping mission is quite easy because you just stick it into the soil. But when it's a 3D object, suddenly your grid pattern becomes 3D, not 2D. So it becomes a little bit more complicated. So there is a skill level required to fly it. But it's quite an interesting, area. And this is where I think the likes of Skydio are quite interesting, because what they're doing is they're essentially being able to navigate through the world using vision. And I could see an application where they take what they've got and they do automatic photogrammetry. And take away that manual skill of having to fly that 3D pattern, because they can sort of almost do on the fly photogrammetry, and it just goes around the building and fills in the gaps as and when it needs to. I could see Skydio. If someone from Skydio is watching this, let me know and give me some money and I'll help you.
But that's your 6 little tiny drones in a box that have the ability to do that. They weigh next to nothing. They have a great sensor on them. You rock up to the building. So for a long time, I've had an image in my head of this lad that turns up and he eats his pie, gets this thing off the front seat, is plugged it into the cigarette lighter, they're all charged up, and off they go, swarm around the building, do their thing, little things, doing their own thing. And then at night, he goes down the pub, puts on his epaulettes, tells the ladies he's a drone pilot, but really by day he just eats pies off the back of his ute, And I think that's perhaps where it's going. And you'll still need that surveyor and that knowledge to get useful data out of whatever's produced.
It's all about the data, Gary. It's all about it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Look, and with that, with an hour and a half gone by, I'm going to say again, any more before we go? We've been here so long, there's probably has been more news happening. Going once, going twice. Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Those of you watching at home, 2100 GMT next week. Have a lovely rest of the week. Gentlemen, thank you very much. See you all then. Be safe. Keep in your trousers or whatever it's to say. Cheers, everyone. Bye.
Yeah.
The end.